Um, Thank you very much, Nasser. Finally, I'd like to turn to our guest today, who is Walid Al-Omri. We welcome him to our press conference. Walid is the bureau chief, the Jerusalem bureau chief for Al Jazeera, and he worked directly with Shireen and the other journalists in our complaint. Walid.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have a very important announcement to make. Al Jazeera has decided to take Shireen's case to ICC to hold her killer accountable and bring justice to Shireen. In addition, Al Jazeera is exploring all legal possibilities and is determined to bring justice to Shireen. And we welcome every initiative to follow up on this crime. I like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this press conference in solidarity with Shireen and all other Palestinian journalists targeted by Israeli occupation forces. IFJ, Palestinian Journalists Syndicate, International Center of Justice for Palestinians, Doughty Street Chambers, Bindman's LLP. Shireen Abu Akleh was iconic and recognizable person. She was assassinated by the Israeli military army, the same occupation force who occupied Palestinian territory for 55 years. Now and after more than 2 weeks of Shireen's assassination, we have at least 4 investigative reports. The last one was published yesterday by the Palestinian Attorney General. The investigation reveals that the bullet that killed Shireen is a type of bullet capable of penetrating to body armor and helmets, and all elements emphasize premeditated murder. This important report confirms the CNN report published on 24th of May that explains that Shireen was targeted by the Israeli army. It also confirms the AP report that was published 1 day before. All those investigative reports reconfirms what Al Jazeera said around the murder of her dearest senior correspondent, the truth, and denies the Israeli claims. Now I have a presentation telling the story for you. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The day of crime, Wednesday, May 11th, 2022. The location was Jenin City and refugee camp north of the occupied West Bank. The crime occurred while Shireen was doing her job as journalist covering a military incursion of the camp. Shireen sent last email to Al Jazeera newsroom in Qatar at 6:13 early morning. The text telling Al Jazeera that occupation military forces enter and besiege a house in Al Jabriyat neighborhood. We are on the way there. I will send an update once the details are clear. Shireen and her crew and SNG broadcast van left the hotel heading to the refugee camp in the western part of the West Bank town of Jenin. At 6:27 a.m., local Palestinian news group published the news about the injury of Ali Samoudi, the local producer assisting Shireen. Shireen was shot immediately after. This is the email. I forgot even to mention that. What is the others? Yeah. I was informed by someone inside the hospital in Jenin of Shireen's death at 6:38. I did not announce it immediately as we had to contact her brother and family first, and we awaited the announcement by the Palestinian Ministry of Health. At 7:13 a.m., I announced the tragic news live on Al Jazeera while I was on my way from Ramallah to Jenin. Shireen, her crew, and SNG arrived to where other journalists were gathered. Israeli occupation troops had taken position at the other end of a street that intersects with this street. Second, after Shireen and her crew prepared themselves by putting on the press labeled bulletproof vest and protective helmet, they began walking forward carefully with assisting local producer Ali Samoudi and local journalist Mujahid As-Saadi and Shada Hanaishi. All of these journalists were wearing protective gear labeled clearly as press. The group of journalists was walking about 170 meters away from where the Israeli soldiers were positioned, and their journalists were fully exposed to the soldier. Fourth, there were no Palestinian protesters nor any armed men or resistance fighters present at the same location where this group of journalists was present. This is confirmed by photos and eyewitnesses. In this image, you can see clearly Shireen and other journalists walking near a wall. As you see them there, the three people in this picture. In this video, where is the video here? Can you do it from there? It's better if somebody can do it from there. And I will follow from my computer because it's... Go back. Yes, this is video. There is video here. Yeah, this one. Yeah. In this video, we can hear Shireen say Ali was injured. Seconds before, she was fatally shot. After Ali Samoudi is injured, this video shows him running to a nearby car to get transferred to hospital, and Shireen is seen running back and trying to hide. After another round of gunfire, the camera shows Shireen on the ground. Yes. Journalist and colleague Shada Hanaishi tried to approach Shireen from behind a nearby tree, even though she was terrified. But the Israeli occupation forces' ongoing fire prevented her from reaching Shireen. Both Al-Najah University forensic report and Palestinian public prosecutions report confirm that Shireen was hit by a bullet fired from a powerful and fast weapon. The bullet entered from under her left ear and pierced through her head to the top of the right side of her head. The bullet did not go out of her head because the helmet prevented it, which left marks inside the helmet. Hair was stuck inside the helmet and obvious cracks in its outer shell. The injury was fatal. The conditions under which the shooting took place in terms of location, timing, and details of the injury all confirm that Shireen was shot by a sniper's rifle that targeted her as a direct mark. These conditions also confirm that the bullets fired could not have come from any other direction than that of where the occupation's forces were situated, as there were no bullets fired from any other directions. Why do I say that? That is not an accusation in any way or form. Shireen Ali, Shada Mujahid, and all the other journalists and media crew that were with them were all wearing the required protective bulletproof vests and protective helmets, which clearly distinguish them as press journalists. These press vests are widely known to the Israeli military forces, and the crew was in a location where many other journalists had gathered, and they were clearly visible to the Israeli army jeeps. And Al Jazeera SNG broadcast van was parked in the same location, and it's widely known as well. Shireen was hit by a direct bullet behind the ear in a location that is not covered by the helmet or vest. She was killed with predetermination, and Ali was injured with intention as well. Why would they target Shireen and execute her in such a hideous crime? Why would they target Shireen? These three investigation reports that we have before the Palestinian investigative report that the Attorney General published yesterday. This is the CNN. His conclusion that Shireen was targeted. Before that, we have the AP, who said that the bullet fired from Israeli gunfire. And this is the first one, which was 3 days after they killed Shireen. It's from the Deutsche website who investigated the situation. And all of them, they confirm what I am saying here. Incitement that precedes the crime and the incitement and statements that followed, which were carried out by Israeli journalists and politicians, confirm that their goal was to, first, direct a powerful and painful blow at Al Jazeera because of its professional coverage after they failed at accusing Al Jazeera of lies and incitement. On June 5, 2021, Al Jazeera correspondent Jivara Bouderi was arrested and beaten in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in Jerusalem, and on May 15, 2021, they bombed and completely demolished the building in Gaza that hosts our bureau. We have videos here about these two incidents. This is the building where Al Jazeera was in Gaza that they bombed. And here we have our correspondent Jivara Bouderi when they beaten. Okay. Second, they choose Shireen because she was a senior correspondent for Al Jazeera. She is well known and had great journalistic stature in Al Jazeera and the Arab media sector. She is internationally known for her professionalism. Third, they know that Shireen is a Palestinian Christian, and they mistakenly thought that killing her would not anger the Palestinian public, which is largely Muslim with a Christian minority. And since they believe and claim that the Palestinian people are groups of fundamentalists, Islamists, and not humans, they thought that the Palestinian public will not be angered if the victim was Christian. They were mistaken. Fourth, they know that Shireen is an American citizen, but they assumed that this would force the USA to help them in obscuring the truth, as had happened with the murder of American Jew Rachel Corrie by an Israeli bulldozer in Gaza in the 16th of March 203. Fifth, they murdered Shireen thinking that this will terrify other journalists from covering their hideous crimes. Now, after paying this heavy price, what I hear from my colleagues is the exact opposite. Instead of stopping their crimes, the occupation authorities broke the mirror that reflects the ugliness of their behavior. The Israeli occupation's positions and its propaganda. They changed their story 7 times within 2 days after they killing Shireen. The first was, they published the first story, it was at 7:45 in the morning of Wednesday. First Israeli official statement was issued in Hebrew. Then they issued that in English, and they telling that the statement was issued 5 minutes after Shireen was executed. It stated that joint military forces from the Israeli army and the general security and border control had been activated during the past few hours in the refugee camp in Jenin. In the course of their activities, they became under fire, which they responded to and injured were reported, and that they were inspecting the injury of a female journalist. In between, there is a website belonging to the settlers, a settler website which takes its information from the Israeli army, published a news stating that our forces have shot and wounded a number of terrorists in Jenin. A journalist from Al Jazeera was killed. Israeli authorities and media outlets continued to promote that story until the next day, when they retracted their story to state that investigations conducted by the Central Regional Command of the Israeli Armed confirmed that a Dovdovan army unit fired tens of bullets in Jenin refugee camp. It was Haaretz who published this. The Israeli attack on the corpse of a funeral procession in the Saint Joseph French Hospital. This I will mention, and I will end with this, okay? If we were put everything I have just said aside, with your permission, to say that there are doubts regarding the identity of who committed the crime against Shireen, how can we then explain this? Israeli forces stormed into the hospital yard while mourners were preparing to begin Shireen's journey towards her final resting place. resting place. And they almost brought the coffin down to the ground. How can a person carrying the casket with both hands be able to get violent against the occupation armed soldiers and policemen who were beating them up? If we were to assume that there was actual violence, which did not happen, as I am an eyewitness myself, how can we explain this video? Inside the buildings, the soldiers inside the buildings of the hospital. Nobody can explain this at all. The last thing I just want to mention, and this quotation, the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Palestinian Issues, Francisca Abelbanz, said in response to the execution of Shireen on May 22nd, 2020, "We demand a transparent international investigation into the murder of Shireen Abu Akleh. It is the international community that has allowed Israel to evade decades of punishment for its crimes against the Palestinians. I call for the dismantling of the apartheid regime imposed by Israel on the Palestinians and the implementation of international law as in Ukraine." Thank you.